The first try. I don't get it, said Aaron, this is stupid. Jason, the black-haired apron-wearing teenager, glared at his friend, rolling his shoulders back to ease the tension. Jason took his gloves off outside the hot baking tin roof shack while hot coals slowly heated his project. I mean, Aaron continued, you can get that stuff at the dollar store, you know, but I made this one, Jason replied with a small prideful flame in his scrawny chest while he ran his smudged hands through his black hair. I don't know, it's just nice. His friend rolled his eyes. Aaron, don't you have somewhere else to go? Hey, don't blame me for speaking the truth, Aaron threw up his hands. Jason stood silent. But hey, to each their own. I get it, no, you don't, Jason muttered under his breath. But why work for old man Abacus? What's the problem? You told me I should get a job for the summer. Jason, you know why no one works for him? He's ancient. I mean, I get you want to do things old-fashioned. But, man, at least get some high-tech stuff to make things go faster than a rusty snail going 0.001 miles per hour. I don't care, Jason replied, it's a job and it's decent money. Aaron threw up his hands with a sigh. Anyway, I'm gonna ask my mom for a job. Perks of being an only child, you know it, Aaron smirked. Catch you later, Jay, see you. The black-haired teen waved. Jason looked at his black apron covered in dust and dirt like his brown industrial boots. He sighed. Was Aaron right? Was he just prolonging a dying horse's death? Jason never saw Mr. Abacus use newer machinery. Every tool inside the shop was either given or made by him, especially the tongs. Jason shook the soot out of his short hair, and the 14-year-old boy placed his earbuds and safety glasses back on. It was a dated hobby job, but it was an art he appreciated. Blacksmithing satisfied Jason. The smell of hot metals funneling through the overhanging vent tickled his nose, and the satisfying curving, straightening of the metal placed a strange crooked smile on his face. He was a mad scientist making the next great creation. The boy looked to the forge. The project was ready. Mr. Abacus's pay was very decent, but it wasn't enough for the new game console Jason wanted. That would have to wait. People paid lots of money for Mr. Abacus's creations, but Jason could only do simple small trinkets like crosses, toy swords, and belt buckles. But this time, this would be different. Jason's project was attached to a long piece of rebar. Carefully, he pulled it out of the forge, placed the large white-hot block on the anvil, and struck it with a large hammer. Clang, clang, clang. This was a secret project. He worked on it any time Mr. Abacus had to run on an errand, which was a lot. Jason was trying to make a hammer for Mr. Abacus to sell. Hammers were much harder to make and took a lot of patience, skill, and effort, but they made more money. Jason had been working in the forge for a whole month now. So he figured he could at least try. Soon, the piece cooled and he shoved it back into the forge. The teen wiped his fair-skinned brow. The hammer had taken about 5 days to make, but even with Mr. Abacus being gone for long hours, Jason couldn't figure out how to get the cylindrical metal to square out. It still looked like a vaguely rectangular bat that was cut flat at the end. Yet with the constant heating and cooling, Jason hoped his project wouldn't do the one thing that he feared. Just as he pulled out the white-hot piece, he heard tires screeching to a halt outside. Abacus, Jason gasped. He looked around. He needed a hiding place. The floor under the table? No, fire hazard. In fact, everything inside the small square shack was a safety hazard as long as the piece was white-hot. Outside. The shop had 2 sides. The front side had a patch lawn and then the main road, and the back side had gravel, old parts, and car junk lay around in organized piles. Jason threw the metal clear past the mounds. He shut the back door just as Mr. Abacus came in. Hey, Mr. Abacus, says Jason, smiled the old skinny pale man who spoke with a slight southern accent. How's it going? Fine, just fine. Yeah, he gulped quietly as Mr. Abacus placed the stuff down on the counter right next to the front door. I didn't think you would be back so soon. Mr. Abacus turned his bald liver-spotted head. His white thin hair grew from the sides. The old man pushed his round-rimmed glasses further up his face. I had a short list, he smiled with wiry lips. But that just means we have more time to finish those crosses, right? Oh, right, Jason sighed with a small smile. The sun shone brightly through the large shack windows. The shadows inside slowly moved to the east as Jason helped Mr. Abacus fix the old metal tables and chairs, which were Mr. Abacus's larger projects. That's when Jason heard a strange sough.
The middle child, being the middle child isn't easy. That is something I learned at an early age. First is the oldest child. They are the darling one the parents dote on when born and then make all the mistake while learning to be parents, or not. Then comes the second child. Now that they know the binky on the floor isn't going to make the kid deathly ill, they pick up it, rub it against their clothes and give it back. The parents are now comfortable, but their focus is still on the oldest who is learning all the wonderful things. Meanwhile, the second child is stashed in a baby seat to entertain themselves. Along come the youngest who gets a lot of attention just by being the baby and the only boy. They will remain the perpetual baby if the last of the children. The one who gets away with everything simply because they are the youngest. Meanwhile, we older kids are told to look after your brother, which allowed mom time to cook, clean, or grabs a few minutes of relaxation. We never wanted to look out for the youngest who was always in the way and demanding our attention. Unless we were bribed or paid for that service, we would do things like make mud pies and feed them to him. And yes, he ate them willingly. Being the middle child meant you were the forgotten one. The one who was expected to follow the older child and just do what was asked. Being the middle child meant that everyone paid attention to the oldest and the youngest and forgot you were there. Being the middle child meant you were invisible. What I learned from being invisible were things like self-sufficiency and relying on no one. That leaving home and making my way in the big bad world without my parents' help, unlike the other two, wasn't all that difficult if I worked and managed my money. I was also the one who returned home to take care of them during their old age and youth. I found the time to take care of the parents who forgot I was there, unlike the other two who waited to get what they wanted without lifting a finger to help me, or their parents who gave them everything. Do I sound bitter? Well, I'm not. Just disappointed in how I became the caregiver and the one who picked up the pieces during death while the other two went on as normal, seldom visiting unless they wanted something. But that isn't what this story is about. This is about that one time when I wanted and needed attention but didn't get it. The time that pointed out how much I didn't matter in my family or the world for that matter. The time I learned I was on my own and to expect nothing from any of them. It was Christmas and I was 8 years old and in 3rd grade. 2nd grade hadn't been all that good for me. My handwriting was a major problem, and my teacher gave me lower grades on all my work because of what she called chicken scratches. Even when I did my best, it wasn't good enough, and she would give me lower grades. Not my fault my hands wouldn't do what my brain told them to do. Or maybe it was because my brain was working 3 steps ahead of where my hands were. Either way, my writing wasn't good then or now. Typewriters and computers became my best friends in high school. Making my work readable, sending my grades from average to the top of the class. Anyway, in 3rd grade I finally received an A+ on a story I wrote. It had my best handwriting, and an original story, and well-drawn pictures for illustration. This was something I to be proud of for me. I got the story back just before Christmas break. I knew my grandparents and aunt were going to be here, so I saved the story to show them my accomplishment. My aunt and grandmother were both teachers and I hoped they would be proud of what I had done. The big day arrived. I let the other two show off all of their things before asking my aunt would look at what I'd written. She said, in a minute. When I asked my grandmother to look at my story when my sister went to get something, she said the same thing. In a minute, I watched while my sister, the oldest, got multiple things to show her. My brother was picked up and cuddled and passed between the two women, and talked to as I patiently awaited my turn to show them the only thing I felt they would be interested in. The excitement from earlier seeped away into a sensation I couldn't define other than sad and excluded. After what seemed like forever, I backed away from where the two women were sitting, turned, and trudged away. The heaviness that filled me made each step more difficult that then last until I needed to pull myself up the last of the stairs. I forced my feet to take me to my bedroom. I stared at the story I still held. My fingers began by ripping off a corner, then progressing to shredding the story no one but me cared about into slivers of worthless silliness, making sure no one would ever see it again. My finest work, and all I got was a good job from my mother, who was too busy to stop and read it.